Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cinematic Schematic, the official podcast of the Cinematropolis.com, your home to thoughtful conversations on film. I'm your host, Caleb Masters, and today we are taking a trip all the way back to the gritty 80s with a little bit of a queer twist to it. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're reviewing Rose Glass's new film, Love Lies Bleeding. It's been making some waves on the film festival circuit. I'm, of course, talking about Sundance. I'm talking about, I believe it's the Berlin Film Festival, and we're so excited to jump into it. So we're going to start by breaking the ice. I normally do an icebreaker question, but this week, this is our first episode since the Oscars were held. So we're going to provide some quick reactions to the 2024 Oscars, talk a little bit about the broadcast, as well as the award winners, before jumping into a spoiler-free review where we'll provide a verdict on Love Lies Bleeding. And then we'll conclude the show by going into an in-depth spoiler discussion. Now, joining me today, my co-host, he wasn't sitting by my side on Oscar Sunday, sadly, but he is sitting across the table from me now. Laron Chapman. He's my co-host, award-winning Oklahoma filmmaker. Welcome back, sir. You survived the trip to Austin, Texas. How was it?
I did, and I wasn't sitting beside you during the Oscars, but we were furiously texting between each other, so it's like we were there.
At one point, I just started texting you obscenities.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. A play-by-play. Happy to be here and excited to talk about this movie. It combines a couple of things I really love, those things being Kristen Stewart and then genre films. So, this is right up my alley in terms of what I seek out going into the movies.
This is why we go to the movies, man. We go for little gritty crime dramas that we'll talk about here in a minute. After we introduce our next guest, he's a contributor here at the Cinematropolis Flick Attack, and I think most recently was on our Exorcist Believer episode. Thank you for sticking with us. Christopher Shultz, welcome back.
Hi, thanks again for having me.
I'm so excited to welcome a first-time guest for our next seat. Very excited to welcome. For many years, she's been doing shorts programming at the deadCenter Film Festival. Camila Chaves Rojas.
Yeah,
Cam,
that was
welcome.
perfect. Hi, I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Our paths randomly crossed. I won't go into it. Our paths crossed, and you walked up to me and introduced yourself, and I was
at cookies.
Yeah. And I was definitely it was a mutual my wife's one of her friends' birthday parties, and so you come up to me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're the other person from deadCenter I haven't invited yet. That I was like, we just hadn't had a chance to cross paths. And then I look at the schedule and I'm like, hey, Laron, do you think she would be into Love Lies Bleeding? He's like, yes. So thank you for accepting the invitation. Welcome. So excited to have you on the show.
No, it's super cool that we just have this community. And
Yes.
I had seen you during deadCenter last year, just, interviewing all our awesome filmmakers that came down. And yeah, I just wanted to see what this was all about. And yeah, I kind of just was like, that's him at cookies. I'm just going to say hi. So now we're here.
Yes. Well, thank you again for stepping up. You guys did an amazing job programming the festival. So super excited to see what you guys bring to this year's festival. I'm sure plenty to talk about that in future episodes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we had a blast in Austin. Like it was me, Paris, and Laron, just like our team just going to shorts programs. And so that was really fun to have people to bounce ideas off.
Yeah.
Because my first time at South by, I was mostly by myself. So sometimes you just need people to talk to after, to kind of digest some ideas,
And last but certainly not least, I'm so excited to welcome the director of programming at deadCenter, Oklahoma filmmaker, Sunrise Tippeconnie. Welcome back, Sunrise. You came back after Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah, Killers, yeah. I love talking, and just like Laron, if I can talk about Kristen Stewart, I'll have a good day. And then the genre stuff, and then Rose Glass. It's just, to me, it's a nice shining star for independent work. And anytime we can sort of bolster people that are making unique things outside of the studio system, that's a win, I think, for cinema. So
Absolutely.
I'm happy for that. So, and I'm glad to sneak in here.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Laron calls me up and he's like, hey, Sunrise.
He's into it.
He's into this movie. Can we bring him on? I was like, Sunrise, he attended the world premiere for this movie, right?
Yeah, he saw it before
So
I did.
Yeah.
let's get here. Let's bring him on. Yeah. So Sunrise, always a pleasure to have you at the table. And I think it works out because we can all talk about Oscars together too, which is an important topic for everyone at this table to varying degrees, whether it be pragmatic pet project type things, or you're actually to the awards. We'll talk about that more in a moment, but before we get to any of that, if you enjoy the show, please support us by subscribing to the show and leaving us a rating and a review on your preferred podcast app. Now, any app is welcome. Apple Podcast tends to be the one that gets the most clout. Our goal for this year is to get to 200 reviews on Apple Podcast. We've got 42, so I got a long ways to go. I need your all's help, listeners. I need you guys to tune in. But I do want to firstly say thank you to the listeners who did actually log on to Apple Podcasts, an antiquated system for rating things and figuring out how to do that. We have 3 reviews we're going to read today. There are actually a few more that came in, but we picked just 3 from the bunch. Laron, would you like to do the honor of reading our first review?
Yes, this one comes from MT Lawyer 01, entitled Fantastic Show. I love this show, love the chemistry between the host, fun film selections, thoughtful conversations, great content, highly recommend for film lovers.
I appreciate you, MT Lawyer 01. I don't know if I know you IRL or if you've discovered us through the power of the internet, but regardless, thank you so much for the kind words and your support. Our next one comes in from Lord Farquaad 91. I bet this is a millennial who likes Shrek or did like Shrek at one point in their life. Their review is best kind of deep dive. This podcast is a refreshing combination of wit, humor, and intellectual analysis of film. I cannot recommend them highly enough. Lord Farquaad, thank you so much for the kind words. And, if you reach out to us at the Cinematropolis@gmail.com and tell us who you are, I might bring you back on the Shrek special episode whenever that, happens one day, I'm sure. Laron, take us away with the last one.
Last one comes from Tate Gatlin, titled The Movie Lovers Podcast. Caleb and Laron bring tons of insight and analysis to movies in their conversations. Give a viewer a chance to re-experience an interesting film. Their takes may not be your takes, but they are always well thought out.
Well, thank you, Tate Gatlin. Very kind. Thank you for the kind words. We appreciate the support, listeners. We're not Patreon funded. We're doing this because we love movies and we love our community, and we want to just share the conversations with you all. The best way you can help us get discovered by more folks like yourself and also help us grow our show for the audience is by heading over to leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts.
Now, Caleb, I have a funny confession to make here. Yes. One of these handles looked really familiar, MT Lawyer 01. And I've recently found out and had to cross-reference on the way here. That is my mom. And so what is really funny about this and a little troubling is that, one, I didn't know she listened to my show. That warms my heart. But also she listens to our show. So,
that would horrify me if my mom
now I'm
listened to our
terrified
show,
about every F-bomb or phallic joke I've ever made on this show. Not that that's like our brand or anything, but, when you're in a comfortable space, things get said. So if you're listening,
we did have a review on Poor Things earlier.
Yes, exactly.
Last year,
so if you're listening now, I'm sorry and thank you and you're welcome and I love you and I'll see you sometime soon.
Thanks, Laron's mom. We love you. Thank you for all your support and for raising such a fine, astute, professional, awesome friend like Laron. So listeners, you can submit your reviews. Again, that's Apple Podcasts. Real quick, just go to the if you're on an iPhone, it's the podcast app, search Cinematic Schematic, and then scroll down to the bottom. You can hit 5 stars. The reviews takes an extra 15, 30 seconds if you want to write something. Let us know what you think. You can also email me at the Cinematropolis@gmail.com or hit us up on our social media channels, including Facebook at facebook.com/the Cinematropolis or on every other channel at the Cinematrop. With that said, thanks for indulging those reviews and the kind words of listeners. Let's move on to our icebreaker today.
And the Oscar for Best Picture is presented to...
And the Oscar goes to...
And the Oscar goes to...
And the Oscar goes to...
We're going to be recapping this year's Oscars. So the 2024 Oscars, the 96th Annual Academy Awards. Can you guys believe we're really close to the centennial year? It's pretty wild, right?
Pretty insane.
With that said, just a few highlights I want to hit on, and then we'll kind of go around the table and share our thoughts. Jimmy Kimmel, he did return to host again for the 4th time. One thing in particular that stood out to me was that he acknowledged in his opening monologue how difficult 2023 was. So we saw him kind of acknowledge, there was 2 strikes, SAG-AFTRA, WGA. And then they brought on a lot of non-union workers who did not cross the picket lines and stood with the unions. Again, just kind of a nice little way to be like, hey, we're a union town, we stand together. I have a bunch of other things. I'm not going to go through each one of them one by one. But I just want to acknowledge that the there was some political, we got a little bit of everything you expect the Oscars. You got some vaguely or either directly or vaguely political speeches. Ryan Gosling did show up and did deliver on I'm Just Ken. Wow, just incredible performance. I honestly can't believe they pulled it off. We even got references to politicians when Jimmy Kimmel ran out of things because they got done early. They got done early, and Jimmy Kimmel's like, "What do I do?"
And they started late.
So ran very efficiently. And John Cena came across the stage naked. So many things. So I'll start with you, Laron. What did you think of the broadcast overall?
I was surprised how smoothly it went. Typically, even for me as someone who it's my Super Bowl, Miss America, whatever, of the year, I was surprised how at the 2-hour mark, I was like, oh, we only have an hour left, and we haven't even gotten to the meat of this. And normally I'm like, it tends to drag at that point. So I really do think it was paced incredibly well. That's one thing I noticed about it. Also, I loved that they brought back the past winners approach for the nominees. I always think this ceremony is always more about peers that are celebrating their peers. And I just think that's just such a unique and very specific way to do that. And that way that every nominee gets, their moment, to shine for their nominee. Instead of just a clip, which we can see, it does mean more when someone has a personalized statement to give about you. And so I loved they brought that back. And I think in some ways that helped truncate some of the time,
absolutely,
because the clips typically take longer. So,
and because of that, we got a reference to Tropic Thunder, one of my favorite movies that I'm not allowed to say publicly that is one of my favorite movies.
Yes.
I thought that was great. Sunrise, what did you think of the broadcast overall?
I agree. The 2-hour mark, I was a little bit worried, but it seemed like it was paced very well. I was very impressed with the direction of it. Just where the camera was placed in relation to the audience, like being behind or on stage looking past like Billie Eilish into the audience. And then the slow revelation of like how wardrobe and the lighting and set design reinforced themes of the movie. It's like suddenly became pink as the camera kind of moved around. I thought that was really impressive, and it made me engage in a way that I hadn't been in the past. So I felt like that was really surprising how fresh that was. I did wish that they had indicated vocally some recognition of the Osage singers.
Yeah.
I think that was the one thing where I felt like there was a little bit of a sticking point in the broadcast, and I don't know if that was out of time or just consistency, but there's an element of just like the tribal specificity that would acknowledge those people in a way that kind of was ignored or just overlooked, and it's probably just because it's not convention there, but I felt like that was something that I wish had happened. But overall, it was really enjoyable. I mean, like the I'm Just Ken was really hit it out of the ballpark with that. And I was really impressed with how they were able to maintain the presence of Barbie.
Yeah.
Despite the minimal awards.
Yes.
Just the one for the best song.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Chris, what was your take on the Oscars this year?
Overall positive. I agree with everything Laron and Sunrise have said so far. I think it was really streamlined, really effectively done. I appreciated that it really seemed to lean into sort of like the love of movies a lot more than I think previous broadcasts have in the past, where there's been a level of cynicism, I think, in past broadcasts, and that wasn't there. So I really appreciated that.
It's kind of nice that it felt like this year, it really felt like a nice celebration of last year specifically. I mean, obviously there's a lot of references to the history of film, but it was actually just celebrating all the great movies that came out last year. I really thought in one form or another, which is kind of what it should be, right? Like you're like, all right, yeah, that was last year. It was amazing.
Right.
Hopefully, Cam, what was your overall thought on this year's broadcast?
Well, I missed most of it.
Oh, no.
Well, I was at Midnight Shorts in Austin, so I was feeling like the stepchild not allowed to be at the party a little bit. Not really. No, the Midnight Shorts were awesome, but I managed to get there for the last couple of awards. So I missed the performances, but looking back, the I'm Just Ken performance of dragging the cameraman into the frame, I thought that was kind of cool, like an awareness to people at home that who is behind the scenes creating such an amazing experience for everybody, and it's not just the actors and directors and the celebrities. So I thought that was probably my favorite, like, choreography and just the overall experience of that was amazing, And yeah, I do appreciate that they brought back previous actors because, sometimes it feels like, okay, everybody wins and they wipe the slate clean and then we start over. And, this is supposed to be about history of film. They have the Academy Museum. So I feel like maybe that's what informed that decision to continue with the history of what, like, don't forget about last year. Don't forget about Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like, they brought back Michelle and Key, so that was really beautiful to get to experience. And also previous generations, I'm like, what have they been up to? Like, I saw Sally Field. I'm like, hey, girl, like, like that was just cool to see, kind of that, I'm sure for them, it must feel amazing to hear their name again saying, and the Oscar goes to, and then they get a chance to be reintroduced to the kids who are there to watch Billie Eilish. It's like, who is this? Okay, this is so cool. So
I thought it was particularly great to see Mary Steenburgen on stage as well, because I think a lot of people forget she won an Oscar back in 1981, I think, for a movie that nobody remembers.
On brand for the Oscars, actually.
Exactly. So that was cool to just celebrate actors and celebrate history and a little bit of, the cameraman that got his hand kissed by Ryan Gosling,
right?
So.
Nice little reference to the Marilyn Monroe thing.
Diamonds are a girl's best friend, right? Is that correct? Is it the right reference? Yes.
I always think of Madonna because she does it for Material Girl.
Yes. Referencing the same thing.
I know, right?
Yeah.
What I noticed was, especially with the actual award, not the awards themselves, but the presentations. One, I do, whenever you see all those actors on the stage at the same time, you're like, wow. These are some crazy talented people who are still working in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Is a good feeling, especially the actress and supporting actor categories. I was like, man, these people are all like just so crazy talented. I love that they brought in, and this has been done before. I just don't think I'd seen all these different things brought together in one ceremony, especially like sound, how they would in very short amount of time give you like a glimpse of what it sound like before they actually did the work on the movie, and then they would cross cut it, which I was like, yeah, if you're like an average person who doesn't understand how movies are made, it's kind of neat to see, well, what does sound really sound like? And they did the similar thing with the scripts where you see the screenplays pop up on the screen. Again, these are all techniques we've seen deployed in various years at different times, but I thought the way it all came together was the tightest I've ever seen it, where it's very efficient with 5 seconds of here's this movie, boom, next thing. This is going to sound harsh. And I understand the notion behind, letting the elder statesman of the industry name Best Picture, but and Al Pacino, nothing but mad respect. But also, my eyes, they see Oppenheimer. I was like, it's just the weirdest thing. And I know he's clarified that I guess the producer said don't rename the movies or whatever, but it was just such a very weird.
Yeah.
It's like it just came out on that. There was like a moment, if you go back and watch it, where everyone was like, was that it? Oh, I guess that's it. All right. And then they started clapping, It's just, I don't know. I thought it was kind of humorous.
I'm like, who woke him up? I was like, someone pumped steroids into him and pushed him out.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, I want Bill Hader doing an impersonation of Al Pacino.
Oh my gosh. Yes, please. Why was Bill Hader not doing anything at the Oscars? I would kill to see him do more.
Yeah.
But no, anyway, I think overall, echoes some of what you guys have said. I thought it was a top-notch broadcast. At least in the last 10 years, it's probably the best that I can think of, where it didn't go too long. There wasn't people getting slapped or awards getting mixed up.
Man.
Yeah, there was.
That's a thing now.
It's been a rough decade at the Oscars. Okay, and then obviously the pandemic happened in there, and there was the weird 2021 award. It's just there's been a lot
of the ratings were better this year, as I predicted.
Yes.
Not like a huge splash.
4%.
Went up 4%.
Yeah.
They said there's an estimated 19.5 million viewers, which is the biggest it's been in the last 4 years. So that's a good thing.
That's recovery.
I figured with a Billie Eilish and a Ken and Barbie and all of that, I was like, a younger audience is actually going to tune in this year.
Yeah.
There's some things to witness outside of the awards.
That felt like the Barbie effect for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And also Oppenheimer too, like both Barbie and Oppenheimer, because Oppenheimer is definitely more of the Academy catnip, so to speak, but people saw it. I mean, it made almost $1 billion.
Yeah.
So even though it's not a movie that I think is as beloved by the mainstream as Barbie, like people were like, oh, I saw that movie and it was, they felt however they did, but they had recognized the movie.
Yeah.
What's another nice thing, I felt like a lot of the nominees, it just was a really good representation in terms of, you have blockbusters, you've got indie films, you've got prestige films, kind of ran the whole gambit, which I think is going to take us to the award winners. So speaking of Oppenheimer, Oppenheimer took home the most awards of the night with 7, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, Best Original Score, Best Cinematography, and Best Editing. Poor Things was second, with the second most favored movie of the night with 4 wins, including Best Actress, Best Costume Design, Makeup and Styling, and Production Design. As I thought might happen, swept in and stole all of Barbie's thunder. Zone of Interest took home 2 awards of Best International Feature and Best Sound. American Fiction also came in kind of there at the 1 yard line, swooping in and taking Best Adapted. And then Anatomy of a Fall won Best Original Screenplay. And then as Sunrise already alluded to, we had Barbie only took home the 1 award for Best Song, What Was I Made For? Although Billie Eilish has now become the youngest 2-time Oscar recipient, because she won in 2022 for No Time to Die theme, so that's pretty cool. Historic in its own right. And also, just notably, for the 3rd time in Martin Scorsese's career, one of his films that was either nominated 9 or 10 times, Killers of the Flower Moon, went home completely empty-handed. The first time was 2003, Gangs of New York, where it was shut out. The second time was 2020 with The Irishman, where it was completely shut out in the Parasite year. And this year, it just didn't win. It just didn't win anything. And I think we were all generally hoping that Lily Gladstone was going to win Best Actress. If that was the one award the movie took home, it was well-deserved, and I think would have really said a lot about the film's role and I think what the mission for the film was in a lot of ways. And leading into the Oscars, I know, Laron, on our podcast recording, we recorded it before the SAG Awards, and we were like really nervous.
Yeah.
Whoever wins the SAG's probably going to win, though.
Yeah.
Lily Gladstone wins the SAG, and I'm thinking, okay, all right.
Surprising.
Surprising, but I think she's got it.
I didn't think that would happen. And so, and when it did, I was like, well, we got a race now, so.
I thought she had it at a lock when she won the SAG, just because that's usually what happens.
It's the biggest voting body, and they typically do the same, but...
I guess the people in the Producers Guild didn't like Lily Gladstone as much. With that said, what did we think of the awards overall? So Cam, actually, I'll start with you. What did you think of the winners?
I think, the Academy always gets into trouble because they can't make everybody happy, right?
True.
So there's always everyone has their favorite. We were all rooting for Lily for sure. I felt like there are Oscar bait films like Oppenheimer, and I respect Christopher Nolan like a lot. Obviously, I love his films. I watch Batman like every couple months or so, but yeah, it gets kind of frustrating when you feel like the whole presentation of the celebrity, it gets lost, like an actor gets lost in there somewhere because there's so much promotion happening. There's so much campaigning that just feels dirty, or it feels like it's no longer about the artistry. So yeah, sometimes when I see some of these winners, it just feels like, okay, copy paste. And why do we build up these actors, especially Lily? She gets spread after spread, feature after feature. You have this hopeful, positive feeling that, yes, maybe this will finally happen, but it's all about promotion. And it's like, are we really celebrating the artistry at the end of the day, or are we just building celebrity up?
Yeah.
Yep.
And I always think of Cillian Murphy, because he looks miserable trying to do all this interviews. And I think he gets it because he's like, they just love to act. They are these artists that bring so much to us, and we are grateful, eternally grateful to them. But it is a parade. It is like, not to call them dogs, but it feels like a dog show sometimes where, anyway, I was happy with some, sorry, I kind of got lost in a tangent there where I just feel like there was just a sense of disappointment, especially for Lily. And, there's just so many original works, and I don't know. Sometimes I love the, it's Super Bowl, Miss America. You love to see it and everything. But then I'm like, why are you getting my hopes up? Like, I'm getting so excited. It's the whole hype of the award season. And then when it's over, you're just like, oh, well, where does this go? Where does all this anticipation and emotion go? Now it's over.
What does it mean? What does it mean? Especially if you lose.
Yeah, it's a
like,
breakup. That's true. That's true.
And, and they keep pushing on. And I know these celebrities and actors, they have a whole team. They have everything. They're prepared to lose. But I guess as an outsider or someone that loves film, it's, it just feels like, okay, here comes the letdown. Okay, it's fine. It's fine. You know? But overall, I thought it was fine. It went exactly the way I thought it would, and, again, I'm like, why build me up expecting something different? But, hooray for films. But, Oscars can't make everybody happy. So
yeah, I love it because it's just a celebration of movies.
Yeah.
Like, do the awards mean anything? Yes and no.
Yeah.
Because on one hand, I don't think someone getting an award means that their performance is better than someone else who was nominated. Honestly, like, I really don't. I don't like the sportsification of artistry in that way, Cam, that you're sort of alluding to. At the same time, what it does mean is the winners tend to get more clout for their next projects. Yeah, things get greenlit, and in fact, I've just heard when actors win, usually their stuff,
the offers kind of come in a little bit.
Coming in more.
And then they make Catwoman. That's
Well, they do that.
Or they're in a Marvel film or something.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, Brie Larson went straight to Captain Marvel not too long after her win.
That is so crazy to think about. Anyway,
although, I'm sure it was like in gestation long before she was even nominated.
For sure.
Yeah,
but it looks like
the optics are weird.
It looks like if you win, you get millions of money and you're a superhero. And,
But those are the things I look for. It's like it's not. I'm not really. If anything, I'm rooting for someone because I'm more interested in what I think that filmmaker would do with the leverage they get from winning. Less so about they're the best.
Yeah.
Because I think especially this year, Laron, you and I talked about it. The nominees across the board are really strong.
Pretty strong, yeah. And I think too that it's like the when they are nominated, that's really the award, because it's like among all of these people they could have picked, you are the 5 that your peers have come. That's an accomplishment right there. When you get into who's the best among them, then it comes a little icky, because then that's going to be subjective. I've had the argument with people, the Lily Gladstone versus Emma Stone. Poor Things was my favorite movie last year. I think she's incredible in the movie. But personally, I was more moved by Lily Gladstone. And I think that she had to take on this kind of generational trauma and all of imagine this woman's life who we don't have a lot of historical documentation on, and be the voice and the face of that community, and to do so without screaming and shouting. You know what I mean? And so I always tell people you can always go big. Actors can go big. That's not as hard as going small. Not everyone can do small. That's much more of a bigger challenge. Nuance is harder to capture and to be authentic. And that's why I gave her the edge if we're just talking about craftsmanship. But then obviously the historical precipice that we had, that we could have broke a ceiling with, in 96 years of Oscars, was a little disappointing, because there's also the aspect of his cultural and representation, and how much that would mean for that community to have seen that they're in that conversation, and now they're still not. Right. That's disappointing. Yep. It shouldn't be the reason people win awards.
The position you're laying out that I agree with is that people being nominated is kind of the award. So everyone at that point, everyone's kind of on the same tier. Usually, obviously, there are years when you're like, why are they here? But overall, especially this year, no, these people are all pretty A+. So then it's like, well, what do your peers think is the most important thing?
Yeah. 10 years from now, we're not going to be talking about Emma Stone having a second Oscar.
No.
But we would have been talking about the first Native American Indigenous woman, Native Indigenous woman that, to have finally won one, you know. But
not to mention just the projects that I feel like Lily Gladstone would back are a lot different than the ones that Emma Stone's going to back. And the last thing I'll say is Emma Stone's she's gonna be like freaking Meryl Streep. She's gonna be back.
She'll
be back.
Right.
Yeah.
I know. I liked watching him at Sunrise, because he's like, they'll be back. They'll be back.
Yeah.
Because you're right. And I hope I didn't come off very negative. I think I was just, the whole fact that they are nominated is a big deal. I just don't like the celebrification of it.
Yeah.
Or
No, but you're totally right, though. I think your criticism is totally valid.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's the part that just makes me feel icky, and I just feel bad for if I was in that position, it's like now I'm a product instead of just being the artist that, that's the part. I don't know. I was listening to all the stuff that Harvey Weinstein did for Shakespeare in Love and all the campaign tactics he did to make it as icky as it's turned out to be. And it's just, and I know
it takes some value away from the win.
Exactly.
If it wasn't earned for the right reasons,
Yes.
or
It's sort of like the Andrea Riseborough situation
Last
from
year.
Yeah.
Last
Yeah.
year,
Oh,
yeah, where they're campaigning for this person and at the expense of other nominees that could have been highlighted.
On her whole campaign, not to sell that performance short, because I think it was a very good performance, but but at the same time, it's like she was only in the race because she had the right celebrity friends. You know what I mean? It's just, it does turn into a bit of a...
Yeah. Like a beauty pageant. Or
Yeah.
kind of, I don't know.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Who's got the best narrative,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there were positives, though, obviously, like The Boy and the Heron winning animated film.
I was so happy to be wrong about that.
Like, I
so happy.
went against like, I said better judgment, but in the end, I was wrong with there. But that was like a surprise win. Godzilla minus
-1 was amazing.
All these years of Godzilla movies, it's the first one it wins, but it's a worthy one. But that was cool,
When seeing the team, so A, they love Godzilla, B, they love movies, C, they love being in the same room as their like heroes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just
And that's a really interesting moment of like independent work, It's like it wasn't a large like Marvel visual effects team. So the
It's
fact
like
that it was
15
also like
people or
these,
something.
Was it 15 million?
No,
or
they
something?
made them look bad. And I think it's interesting, Oppenheimer and Godzilla both in one room because they're like responses to one
exactly.
another.
right.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Because that's why they made Godzilla -1. They wanted to kind of go, I think I was reading about this because it is a reaction to the nuclear bombs being dropped. So it is a fascinating kind of look at history of having both of these films that kind of like
It's a nice connection,
mirror one another in a sense,
I do really think that's a great double feature, honestly.
Right?
It's-
Yeah. I don't know. I thought that was just, and their shoes. I mean, their shoes with the
Amazing.
with the claw. That was awesome.
All of them. Yes. Sunrise, what was your overall take on the Oscars this year, or the winners?
Well, I mean, I'll just agree that the nominations are really the win. And the actual win is an element of just marketing, I feel like. And it's like, who's the best marketer really is who wins. I was very disappointed. I'm very, I got very emotional and angry when Lily did not win because of the anticipation as a result of SAG. And just seeing the response of like Native people online, there's also a lot of like anger and frustration. I feel like to some degree, the Academy sort of locked an audience out. And I think they're also it's gonna take some time for them to come back.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's very unfortunate. And even though I felt like she was gonna win from day one, I knew that she was gonna win. That was gonna be a difficult thing, and there was a moment of hope there. And I just felt devastated.
I do remember Sunrise. What was it? We did a podcast. It wasn't the Killers of Flower Moon podcast. It was an earlier one. I just remember you saying long before Poor Things, and Eva said, "You're like, Emma Stone's going to win the best lead actress next year." Like it wasn't even, so you were right. Unfortunately,
that was right. Yeah, and I knew it every day.
It's your fault, Sunrise.
It is my fault.
But even we had a kernel of hope, and that's what we said. But that was manifested through the way that was campaigned, and so, and to be honest, I don't think she wanted it for any other reason than for everyone else that wanted it for her.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You could see it even if you rewatch I've rewatched Emma Stone's speech because I was in my head, I wasn't even paying attention to it. I was so upset.
Yeah.
Even though I loved the performance. But if you look at her reaction, she's already looking at Emma and she's already like prepared to clap for her. She didn't have that moment of like, it might be me. You know what I mean? Like, so it almost felt like she knew at that point, even then. And that sportsmanship, but I do think collectively she probably felt like, I know this is important to so many people. And it is kind of unfortunate even for us to have her shoulder the responsibility of all of that, the pressure behind that, like, I hope I win so that I don't become the, you know what I mean? Like the narrative around this whole issue. But yet here we are, so.
Yeah. Well, Chris, we are, as expected, wildly over time on this segment. So bring us home. No, I mean, it's my fault. Chris, bring us home. What was your thoughts on the award winners?
Well, I think we've all kind of touched upon it at this point, but the Oscars and the Academy, they like it big. That's why you see something like Oppenheimer winning so many awards, because this is a big, flashy, blockbuster type film. And that's not a bad thing, but it is just something that the Academy tends to favor over the more subtle, nuanced type stuff, which again is, I think, why we're seeing Lily Gladstone lose to Emma Stone. Emma Stone's performance is big, it's flashy, it's very, I don't want to say in your face, but the film is sort of in your face in a lot of ways. And again, that's not a bad thing. I really enjoyed Poor Things. It was one of my favorites from 2023. And it's not to say that the work Emma Stone did isn't worthy of recognition and of praise, but the Academy is going to lean towards the bigger, flashier stuff. So in a lot of ways, like Oppenheimer winning as much as it did, versus, and even snubbing Barbie to a large degree, because Barbie's kind of big and flashy, but there's so many ideas going on in that film. There's so many layers to what's going on in that film that it's really not that surprising, if you think about it, that it only received a handful of nominations and won award.
I always also, it got 8 nominations, which I think is nothing to scoff at, but the one win, I honestly think Poor Things swept in and just stole up.
Yeah.
It was competing with that movie directly in so many categories, and I just was like, nah, man, they're going to go for Poor Things.
They're going to go the prestige route.
The prestige. Even though there's, honestly, the things they do well are so similar, but one of them is a mainstream popcorn film in their eyes. I'm not saying this, I agree with this. In their eyes, one of these is a big for the populace. The other is an important film about important things.
About the same thing.
About the same thing.
But similar story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Almost identical.
But present it differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of them's by a man, too, by the way.
Right. And there's more sex in one, so.
Right.
Oh, boy.
Anyway, sorry, Kristen, I want to derail you, but I know I clarify.
Mom.
It's true.
I was way less disappointed by the nominations for Barbie and more about the wins.
Right.
And,
the
irony of Barbie losing to Poor Things, the movie directed by a man, it's on brand.
Well, it's Ryan Gosling getting nominated over everyone else in the film, I mean, right?
That one gets complicated. We talked about it.
I know. I mean, I'm not like, I wasn't on Twitter like, oh my gosh, feminism's dead. I'm like, it's like, no, it's just more like it deserves some more love for sure, especially what I think Greta did. I thought she definitely deserved.
Well, that one sticks out like a sore thumb. That snub nomination.
I would have picked her over at least 2 of the other directors personally.
Yeah.
The only other thing I'll say, because we're out of time, but I think my biggest, I was overall pretty satisfied largely with the winners. It's not that nothing. I think there was an undeserving movie that won. I'll put it that way, even if it wasn't the movie I was rooting for. I do have, and I think Oppenheimer was actually a pretty fitting Best Picture win for a lot of reasons that we've talked about on the show previously. It's a synergy between what's flashy, what's air quotes important, and prestige-y. And Christopher Nolan, I really think hats off to the guy. He's been working really, really hard for a very long time, and he actually has principles he stands on, a really dedication to preserving film as an industry, IMAX as a format. So I think it was his time, and I think it was a well-deserved win for Best Director. And I think Oppenheimer is a movie where it's not like he made a mediocre movie and they give it to him for that. It's like, no, it's one of his best movies, I would argue. The one thing I will say, though, is, and it relates to the Poor Things discussion we were just talking about, is Oppenheimer won a lot of awards. And I think I always run into this thing where it's like the Academy, and I think there's just a lot of voter bodies, you pick one movie and then that's just the movie you're going to vote for, number one in all these slots. I mean, Chris, we saw this even in the OFCC. I won't get into it, but it was like, Killers of the Flower Moon just swept a bunch of our awards because that was the movie that as a body people liked the most.
Right.
And it's kind of tough because I feel like a lot of these other movies deserved more of a moment than they got. And I don't think it's that one, as we said, one movie was necessarily light years better than the other. I don't know how you solve that problem because they're using preferential balloting. How do you, it's like
it's an unbiased system,
right?
Technically.
Yeah. So
technically,
sort of.
Sort of.
The budget affects the bias.
Oh,
yeah,
that's true.
Absolutely.
That's true.
But also then it's unbiased, but then also there's oftentimes there's the Parasite, Everything Everywhere at Once, now Oppenheimer this year. Like they pick the movie that's like the movie and it comes in and cleans up and, not undeserving, but there's, other great movies that came out last year, guys. Just a few of them. Okay. Well, that said, those are our thoughts on the 2024 Oscars. Let's move on to our spoiler-free review of Love Lies Bleeding.
So where did you appear from? Oklahoma. I've never been anywhere but here. What were you doing with that big girl?
Get a lot of crazy-ass foreigners, mostly. How's it going, guys? This here's Jackie.
Hi.
She needs a job. Says she'll do anything.
Yeah, you like guns?
Not really.
What the fuck you doing here, then?
So according to IMDb, Love Lies Bleeding is described as gym manager Lou falls for Jackie, a bodybuilder who is passing through town en route to a competition in Las Vegas. So a couple of notable facts for the listeners. This is the second feature film from director Rose Glass following her breakout film 2019's Saint Maud. This film held its world premiere at the air quotes midnight section movie at the Sundance Film Festival, which Sunrise Tippeconnie attended. We'll talk about that more in a moment. This film stars Kristen Stewart as Lou, Katie O'Brien as Jackie, Jenna Malone as Beth, Dave Franco as the sleaziest JJ I've seen in a movie in a long time, and then Ed Harris as Lou Sr. Now playing in a theater near you. We do have actually a pretty decent number of UK listeners. It's coming to you guys on May 3rd, so keep your eyes peeled. Sunrise, I want to kick things off with you, though, because you were in the first group of people to see this film. So talk about your experience watching the film at the world premiere.
A lot of energy, so this was at one of the larger venues at Sundance, and I think it had a lot of hype. I think a lot of people were in great anticipation, and it served itself well. I mean, the audience was very excited, very into every moment, yelling and screaming, and when there were shocks, there was gasps. When there was violence, there was, large, and then applause, and title end credit applause, and Kristen got an applause for her credit. And you could just feel the energy and the buzz that this film just hit it out of the park for most people in that audience. And so much, the lights come up and people are just, it's a standing applause. And the ovation was very long. Like Rose was waiting to speak, and it was very energetic. And it was really incredible just to see and hear it on such a large screen. And you could just, you could just eat everybody's energy up. Not unlike maybe like fueled like the movie kind of does also, I think. So it was really incredible. And I felt very privileged to be in that room. And it was interesting to, afterward to watch Rose and Kristen. They were sort of like maybe the two that spoke the most. I mean, Kristen's a bundle of nervous energy, and then Rose is the complete opposite. Very controlled and very kind of like, not humbled, but very certainly maybe holding things in and carefully revealing things when they need to happen. Mm-hmm. And it just felt like it was sort of like an interesting duo. And I feel like you sense that in the film,
absolutely,
as well. So it's amazing. Very privileged,
and good quality Q&A afterwards. It sounds like
the Q&A was good. It was good. I think people were tired.
It was a midnight film.
Yeah, it was a midnight film. I think the young cast had a lot of energy, and I think Ed was just caught off guard. He was asked a question. I think he was tired, and they kind of fumbled a little bit, but there was a lot of just sort of like excitement and revelation that Rose was somebody to be trusted, and that the actors just felt like they could do things that they couldn't before, and that there was just such a bond, it sounded like. And it just felt like a very pleasing set to be on, just very supportive of artistry. So like that sounded great.
Very cool. I have to say, Lou Sr. Halloween costume 2024, guys. I mean, come on.
The mullets are coming.
I haven't seen a hair do that atrocious in quite a while. I mean, you see, firstly, you see Franco's haircut, the mullet, and you're like, wowza, this is gross. And then you see Lou Sr., you're like,
that's funny. There was a review on Letterboxd I read, and it was like, you see Kristen Stewart's mullet, and you're like, that's a sick mullet. Then you see Dave Franco's mullet, and you're like, that's a sick mullet. And then you see Ed Harris's, you're like, no, guys, that's a sick mullet. And I thought that was the best 3-sentence review of the movie, but yes.
Kristen Stewart in an interview with Seth Meyers called it a skullet because he is bald up top.
There's nothing up top. That's true.
And I cannot get skullet out of my head now.
Well, Sunrise, since you were the first to see it, and it sounds like the freshest to have seen it again, kick us off. What did you think of the movie overall?
The first time, I don't remember where it was in the Sundance lineup, but I felt like this was the film that was the film to see at Sundance. Even though there were some other ones that really moved me, it felt like this one is the one that audiences are going to get behind. I still feel that way. In fact, I keep seeing new things. It's really impressive. Where Rose Glass has come from Saint Maud to this one, just the number of storylines, the number of genre elements that she's balancing, the number of different tones. It's a dark crime genre. It goes into kind of like it's a sort of like comedic crime also. There's sort of like this, I don't know how I described it, but the sort of like fragility of like the one who's afraid to handle things as they spiral out of control. I don't know what that kind of narrative
got Coen Brothers
brother
energy.
Yeah, definitely. When I came out, I was like trying to describe this like it's Raising Arizona, and Kristen Stewart is the Nick Cage role.
Yeah.
Yep. Really incredible. And just seeing that particular scenario, seeing Kristen as a comedian as things start to spiral out of control, is something I feel like I have not really seen from her. And it feels like it's just a testament to the things that she can accomplish. And it's just so, it's so impressive to me how there's so little screen time, very few moments, but she's able to do so much with her body, with her inflection, with her eyes, and the use of her body. Like there's a moment where she like gets up from Jackie when she's going to go to the fridge and get the vials, and all she does this very simple kick with like one of her feet. It's sort of like this love kick, and it's so simple and it seems so off the cuff, but it's the fact that they've probably done this several times, it just tells me how talented she is to make something feel like it's
lived in,
yeah, and it's happening at this moment, and it's a character that's just responding to things as they occur, and that's really incredible. It happens over and over and over, and that was very impressive. Then there's also these just sort of like ways of addressing the female body and agency, which seem very fresh and surprising. Something that I'd not seen almost at all. Just they're sort of like building up of a female body in a way that challenges so many conventions, both in the film and then just like in terms of societal expectations of what a female body is and what a female body is that's beautiful and attractive and what it can do and accomplish and what a dream of that body is and to whom. All those things were really astounding to me. And there are further things about like control over space and all these other things, but it was just incredible to see all of this just reveal itself to me. And I was convinced by the end that Rose Glass is really a major talent, where going in, I wasn't sure. I was like, this could go many different ways because
sophomore movies are always the real test.
Absolutely. Sophomore. And the first one is good. It was good. And I liked this narrative. I liked the genre. I liked the performances, but there just felt like there was something missing. And I felt like those things were suspense and perhaps like clarity and motivation. And this one really builds all those things up, despite what Richard Brody says. I don't know if you've read this review, or he's like saying that audiences are the ones that have to fill in the subtext of backstory. And I'm like, that's not at all there's clearly a lot of backstory that's going on in this film. And I feel like he needs to watch it again. But
I thought it was pretty clear. And I read almost nothing about them. Outside of that IMDb synopsis and the star list, I had no idea what to expect, honestly. Yeah. And it seemed pretty clear to me. I had just as much text as you would expect in any other crime thriller, where it's like, well, clearly these characters have histories and whatnot, but Richard Brody, man, having a bad cranky day, I guess.
Yeah, I was like, weren't you here in the 70s when this kind of happened? And
he was tired.
Yeah, he was tired. Well, then it was not for him anymore, I guess.
Well, Cam, what did you think of the film?
So I honestly talking about the body and what is, as a woman, also as a queer woman, I had a really visceral reaction at the end of the film. Like, I was mad, but I felt really happy. And it was just how all the emotions kind of culminated with the violence, as well as like, because it takes you for a roller coaster ride, right? Like there's so many different storylines, like Sunrise was saying, and there's a fine balance of it being a romantic film. And I don't know why I was thinking of all the 80s like Tom Cruise films. I thought of Kristen Stewart as Tom Cruise, like, those like high concept films that they made, like Footloose Flashdance and Top Gun, all of those. I thought of the Don Simpson, right? Like the high concept films of the time where, they would get a record to go with the film or whatever. But anyway, besides the point, I love the film. I just had very complicated emotions about it because I related a lot to Jackie. That feeling of having control over your body for happiness, of trying to find, especially if you struggle with weight and your self-image and what that means, with a complicated family life as well. I shut down. So it was a very interesting emotional experience. And I think Rose Glass just gets it. She understands. And that was the same thing with Saint Maud. She understands, obviously she's a woman herself, but she understands the female experience of just constant scrutiny and body anxiety, and how that can kind of manifest in like sapphic feelings and love, and maybe envy and jealousy towards women, and that's always explored a lot. You think of like persona, you think about wanting to become another person or wanting to absorb them. And, there was that one scene where I don't want to spoil, but there is like a body within a body kind of scene. And it just felt real. And there are no real words to describe it because I just was still like, what am I feeling about this? Because it just brought up so many things from my own life and experiences of wanting to work out, of, those motivational messages in the gym. My parents would get me like trainers and stuff because they were concerned about my weight. So it was like, I related to Jackie so much about wanting this power and strength and just constantly the body, like I have to build myself up. That'll make me happy. So yeah, I loved it. And I'm really excited to see more of Rose Glass because it just, I want to see it again. I just like, I feel like women might just get this feeling of like empowerment, and also just you are thinking about yourself as well. And so it's just awesome.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing and opening up about your own experience as it relates to the film. And that's something, those are the sorts of things
that we can't
miss that. And it's, I think it only adds it makes it that much more impressive that we're touching on really important, sensitive subjects to women that just haven't gotten quite as much, if any, airtime in the cinema. So thank you for speaking out there. Chris Shultz, what did you think about the film?
Oh, I loved it. I was a huge fan of Saint Maud when it first came out. What was that? 2019, 2020? Yeah. It's been a minute since we heard from Rose Glass. So I went into this very excited. And everything I had heard about it, I'd read very little about it too, because I just don't like watching trailers. I don't like reading about a film beforehand. Like, I like seeing a few still images and who's involved with it and maybe a little bit of a plot synopsis, and that's it. But I had heard buzz about it, and everything was super positive. So I was pretty pumped going into it, and it didn't disappoint. I love a film that can just, it starts in such a grounded place, and then everything just kind of untethers. Uh-huh. And I love a film that does that. So I was from beginning to end, I was hooked in it. It's great. I loved it.
Locked in. Chris and I saw this together at Tinseltown, and man, I felt like both of us like locked into the movie immediately because you just kind of get lost in the story and everything that's going on. It was a good crowd too. We had some good laughter.
Yeah, the rest of the audience was similarly locked in. I mean, we were all together in on this.
Like laughed. Everyone laughed together, clapped together.
Yeah.
Even listening to some of the conversations afterwards, because there were actually a lot of younger women who were in the audience as well, which was great. And Chris and I were just kind of sitting there chatting, and then we just kind of like tune in and be like, oh, okay. Just trying to pick up on like the vibes. And everyone seemed to really dig the movie, which is great to hear. Laron Chapman, what did you think of Love Lies Bleeding?
I also loved it. And I thought that it's interesting because I haven't seen St. Maud since it came out, but in thinking about it, what I do remember from it is thinking when I was comparing it as I was watching this film, just how there's similarities thematically, but I feel like tonally and visually they're very different. And I thought that St. Maud kind of takes a more kind of minimalist and cerebral, take on the material. And then it felt like I wouldn't say that Love Lies Bleeding is maximalist, maybe in some aspects and some sequences, but it's definitely more flashy and stylish in that way. But what I was most impressed by was the way that it very kind of seamlessly integrates all of these, and we've kind of touched upon it, all these different genre elements, like crime thriller, film noir, some supernatural elements. There's romance in it, and even some really interesting body horror elements to it. And it does so and makes it all feel like part of a whole, and not like it's just experimenting with things. And sometimes films can throw all these tones in here and people think that they're cool because they're jarring shifts, but it does feel like it kind of massages these things into each other in a way that feels like it's all being employed, for very specific reasons. And so I found that really impressive. This feels like a role that was tailor-made for Kristen Stewart.
Yes.
I mean, just every aspect of this character. So it came as no surprise that she was great in this, but I really think the standout here is Katie O'Brien, who really just shines on screen. She's so compelling to watch in this role. So I'm a huge fan. Yeah, really enjoyed this.
Also, she's so jacked.
Yeah.
I had to have taken. I mean, I'm sure she was fit before getting on this movie, but like, I'm sure she's been working out like crazy. And the results show. I mean, she looks like a full blown, legit bodybuilder in several of those sequences, especially the Vegas sequences.
I think I read that she was actually a bodybuilder.
She was.
Yeah, she was.
Okay, so
she is.
She was full blown.
I think she mentioned it was also doing like 2 or 3 hours of working out at the beginning of each day and the end of each day or something like that.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
I know. I just, there's that scene where Kristen or Lou is like, oh my God, when she sees her body for the first time, like naked. And I had the same experience of like, well, like, okay, I don't know. Like, and obviously the 80s clothes, like I was reading trivia and it said, Katie's like, this makes absolutely no sense to work out in this. And it's like, it's the 80s. Like, it's flashy.
Nothing makes sense.
It's got to be
the
sexy.
Hair didn't make sense. The volume didn't make sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Everything was excessive for no reason. No, I thought she was outstanding. Really, the biggest discovery for me in the movie. She's doing a lot of act. Yeah, there's some. She gets some good lines, but really she's doing so much acting with just her face. Very expressive. Lots of things happening intrinsically. Without spoiling it, and you do kind of get actually in her head by the end of the film. But for the first 2/3, you're like, well, okay, you can see her mind going on this journey and emotionally about where she is in relationship to Lou, where she is in her relationship to Vegas, what rules she's willing to bend. All that stuff I thought was great. And also you mentioned the sort of like motivational gym quote, seeing how that was kind of both motivational but also triggering for her at the same time.
Yeah.
Which again, all in the face.
Right.
I felt like just a tremendous acting there. I mean, you guys have said most of it. I think my favorite thing about this is that it really is, as Laron said, it's combining a lot of different things that I really like. I think on my letterbox I said this is sweaty, smoky, sexy, gross, trippy 80s crime thriller is how I would describe it. Everyone looks like they haven't bathed in a month.
Yeah.
They've been chain smoking cigarettes. They probably just got a tattoo. And I love that you just feel that in every detail of the production, the crappy rundown apartment, even the Lou Senior's house is like that big 80s excess. He's got self-portrait, like all of it just feels so chef's kiss. Like, Rose Glass knew exactly the vibe she was going for in terms of making it feel kind of like I don't know, like a Mean Streets or like just in those gritty crime thrillers where everything just feels gross.
Grimy.
While also incorporating sort of the queer romance as a core part of it without making the movie on the label a queer romance movie.
Right.
It's doing all these things really, really with a lot of finesse. And Rose Glass's visual storytelling, I just found to be pretty outstanding. There's just some shots in it that I feel like really support a lot of the ideas she's working with on a visual level where you could snapshot it and it would tell the audience a lot. So I don't know. Yeah, I think Rose Glass is a major talent for me after this.
Yeah.
Again, like Saint Maud, this is like home run. I can't wait to see your next 3 movies type good. So yeah, love the movie. In terms of, we're going to spend probably most of the time in spoilers, but was there anything you guys wanted to add about how this film provides sort of a unique spin on the crime thriller? Again, we're going to talk about this more detailed in spoilers, but if you were to tee up the audience at all, who haven't seen the film.
I think the introduction again of the supernatural and body horror and even magic realism is very unique here, and interesting things to incorporate into a crime genre. And I felt like that it really gives it a unique flavor, but more importantly, it gives us a very interesting insight into these characters. Because normally these characters are kind of like stock archetypes in these roles, and this gives them these interesting layers that really fleshes them out in ways that words wouldn't. And so because I've heard some critiques of the film saying that that the characters felt a little wooden, and I was like, well, if you're looking at the visuals though, like there's so much like being communicated about their psychology and their mindset there. I just think they're missing that, and they're not used to seeing it told through form. They're used to being told.
Well, I think that's something that's visual storytelling. That's what I'm saying. The performances actually shine through, because you can see, I mean, the actors just are doing so much heavy lifting that's supported by all of the production design, the cinematography, the score. Oh, man, I'm going to sound, everyone's allowed to feel how they feel about this movie. It's totally fine.
Even
but
if
also,
it's wrong.
how did we, what's going on with you guys? What's wrong? Sunrise, anything you want to add about how this puts a spin on the genre?
I actually will say that it's putting a spin so much as like going back to things that I feel like the genre has lost.
Yes.
Like American genres, I think, especially crime genres, used to be about a character that would sort of like discover something about them in the past, and they're wrestling with that past coming back to them. It sort of went away, I think. I'm not sure when, but there's sort of like a quirkiness and maybe like a surrealism that sort of like took over, maybe after The Big Lebowski, I don't know. But this really hit home this idea of like who we once were as related to someone from the past, and how Americans have a tendency to be running away from that. And you can't escape. It's going to catch up to you, and you've got to wrestle with that past. And that was really in this film a great deal. But there's something on top of that, which it felt like it was dealing with, like the past is sort of steeped in a patriarchy.
Yeah.
And it's important to escape that past and find a new future. And I feel like there's a lot of really amazing ways in which the characters sort of find each other and identity to escape that particular past, and rooted in like use of weapons or violence or substance. And it felt like it was, all those things were really intriguing to think about, especially in our time right now, where we seem to be dealing with a lot with all of these questions about systemic issues, particularly related to violence and particularly related to gun violence, and somehow also related to substance like smoking. And that was really intriguing, the way that was dealing with those things for me. And I guess at some level, I was also surprised that it was like basically also a anti-smoking movie to some degree. It's like, how do you kick
it's like
the habit?
It's like her whole motivation.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
I got to stop this.
Yeah, the dude just wants his rug.
Takes me back to 2006's Constantine, where at the end of the movie, all that crazy stuff happens. He's like, yeah, man, I finally quit smoking. Okay. Anti-smoking movie.
It's just a quitting movie. Yeah.
Christopher Shultz, anything you want to add about the genre?
I think it's been pretty well hit upon by everyone so far. I can't think of anything else to add that without just rambling and talking about how much I love it. So yeah.
All right. Well, Cam, anything to add before we move on?
No, I guess I just wanted to say that I always find it fascinating when it's international directors that understand American culture a lot more.
Yeah.
Or the iconography of Americana. Because obviously I was watching Paris, Texas yesterday, and I was like, dang, like this, there's just something about how women understand men a lot more, about like the patriarchy, right? Like the people who are being oppressed understand the oppressor more than you would, You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it's that idea of like, running away from something that is inherently there. And I like that it is queer characters, but it's not just about their queerness. Yeah, there is tension. There is tension, obviously, about the words that are used, like derogatory terms. But I think I just like that it's not all about it. It's just they are who they are. They're in love. And it's not like we gotta, like stand up for ourselves because of this. It's like, no, this is established and we're done with it.
Yeah.
And now they're just a couple.
Now they got to live.
Now they got to live.
Exactly.
Yeah. But no, I just wanted to say, I'm like, how is it that international directors get
And I think it's
Americans
because they're not indoctrinated into the same, there's not that, they're not steeped in it. They're able to look at it objectively. Whereas like even men, even as I have to resist aspects of the patriarchy, knowing full well the damage it's caused, there's still that level of like, I don't know where the entrail is and where the point of like influence, started to know, was this bad? Is this bad? Is this, so they're able to just look at it and observe it and see how it interacts and how it conflicts with things. And so I think that's probably a good way that she's able to observe that. But that's an interesting insight I hadn't thought about.
I would also argue, and this is probably a different podcast, Americans are notoriously bad at remembering / reckoning / preserving the past. It's all about the now and tomorrow.
Oppenheimer, Killers of the Flower Moon. We're reconciling with the sins, and yet we're approaching a lot of the same issues this year in the election year, and we've learned nothing. But anyway, that's again another podcast.
Although another podcast, and then bringing in back Barbie. It feels like Barbie is doing some similar things here, like looking to the future and sort of like just although there are some interesting revelations about like patriarchy and horses, which I've never thought about.
It's the American West, right?
Yeah, the American West.
I mean, it's a Western. That's what I immediately thought. Love Lies Bleeding. I'm like, this is a Western. This is about 80s, the positivity. I always think 80s Coca-Cola commercial going into the 90s where things start to get really messy. But then there's the dark underbelly, the drugs and sex and misogyny of the 80s. So I don't know. This film does so much.
Yeah, on the verge of the border too. Like this
Mexico,
is almost a border film.
Issues with the Berlin Wall, Mexico. Like it's so much.
And there was one point in a trailer, very early trailer. I feel crazy because I cannot find this anymore. But there was a moment in the trailer where Jackie declares that she's like native, and I got very excited about this. And it's not in the film at all. And I don't know if I imagined that, like I wanted it to happen, or if it was there and they cut it out. And that would have been another element of identity that's sort of like just very implicit.
Adds to it,
There was a huge gasp that came out when she said she was from Oklahoma.
They cheered. Yeah.
It's like, that's us, guys. Bring it in.
She's trying to escape Oklahoma.
She's trying to escape all of the terrible things that happened there.
I do like, I really like you mentioned, you brought up that this is about women sort of escaping the patriarchy, and it just seems to be a theme we're really, for a lot of extremely valid and important reasons, as a culture, it seems to be top of mind. And I don't think it's a coincidence. I love the movie though. It's because you have this oppressive system, and it could be a non-queer. It doesn't have to be women escaping, but having that element, as you said, Cam, it adds a whole other layer of subtext and meaning. That if it was just like some like straight white guys, or even people of color, straight men in general, it just wouldn't carry the same weight and nuance. Whereas if by adding in, these queer characters who are women, it kind of seems like it plays into a theme we've seen in a lot of other queer movies about, hey, we've got to escape this system that is constantly trying to put us in these boxes. So
and like visually, the idea of like these queer women in a masculine space of the desert of the West, of like, it's like it's conquered, right? I mean, we all have talked about this, how intelligent this film is, and it doesn't. I just want to see it again.
And it feels like it's also responding a little bit to a Louise in the West.
Yes, of course.
In Ridley Scott's masterpiece.
Yes, but they didn't
kill Louise.
But they didn't kill their gays.
Right. They didn't. Yeah, the ending is very different in this particular film. It's like responding, I feel like, to the difference of our perspective and where we are now versus that film. Anyway, I thought that was pretty cool. That she's like Louise.
Yes.
Lou Jr.
I don't.
Well, not Junior.
Well, but Lou.
This is maybe.
Sorry,
I don't know if we're going
sorry.
to spoiler territory.
Well, yeah.
Sorry.
We'll say for spoiler, but it's good. It's a good note. And I also want to be mindful of the spoilers, but this does happen earlier in the movie. I just want to say the sequences where Jackie is essentially hulking out after she takes the drugs, again, just extremely imaginative way to represent that visually, and just keeps you on the edge of the audience. You're like, is this a thing that's really happening in her world? Is this in her head?
Yeah.
Is it a both? We get
This is how she sees herself.
Right.
This is how.
Yeah. That's where Saint Maud really comes back.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
The sound editing and mixing
the mixing.
in her film, sound mixing in her films are just, it's just so good.
Well, it sounds like we're all on board for more Glass. With that said, let's move on to letter grades. LeBron Chapman, what letter grade would you give this film?
Yeah, I give this an A-. I think this is one that I will watch often. It's a really fresh and exciting independent film, to come out, and I expected this to be good, but there's so much still I feel like I need to peel back and revisit with it, and I'm excited to do so. So yeah.
A-. Man, great movies this year so far. I love it. Only good grades except for, Madam Web. Cam, what letter grade would you give this film?
Oh man, I think I'm in the A too.
You went with an A? All right.
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah.
Awesome. Chris Shultz.
A+.
A+.
Man, perfect score.
Perfect
Chef's
score.
kiss.
5 out of 5.
Chef's
Chef's kiss.
Yeah.
Sunrise Tippeconnie?
I'm trying to go above A. I don't know what that is. Like an A+,
Superior.
above that, whatever that is. 6 out of 5.
A++.
Yeah.
Super A.
101.
Yeah. Super A.
I was going to go B+, but the enthusiasm, especially of this discussion, is taking up to it.
He's dragging our score down, guys.
No, it brings me to, well, it's because we just gave A's. This isn't fair to the movie. We just gave A's to Dune, and this movie is also an A, though. I agree. I think the other thing that's key is I super want to rewatch this, and I think that's also what puts it over for me, because there's sometimes you review a movie, it's really great, but then you never watch it again, which is where I think that's really what sticks it out for me. This is very rewatchable. Can't wait. My wife didn't see this, and I already was like, when I got back, I was like, hey, you should really watch this, or we should watch it together, because I think you'd really like it. So it's going to happen. What other media recommendations would you provide our listeners who are interested in Love Lies Bleeding or loved the movie? That could, again, be another movie, television, novel, music, video game, whatever you may recommend. Chris Shultz.
I can't really think of specific titles, but I would say this movie feels like an unholy trinity of Coen brothers, David Lynch, and David Cronenberg.
Oh, wow.
So I would say watch anything from maybe Blood Simple in particular from the Coen brothers, or Raising Arizona was brought up. Some of those early Coen brothers crime noir type films, and yeah, just about anything from Lynch or Cronenberg would be would get you in the right mindset to watch this film.
Very cool. Cam?
Oh man, I know. I was just trying to think of I saw reference films that Rose Glass had brought up, so I would say Paris, Texas would be pretty fun. Watch Saint Maud. Just get a feel of who Rose Glass is, and if you're on board, then you'll love it. Music wise, I don't know why Boy Genius came to mind, but Kristen also directed a music video for them. So I kind of tonally, and they are queer women as well. So that can kind of get you in the mood of, they talk a lot. They're called Boy Genius for a reason, kind of ironically. So kind of fits into this whole patriarchy, we are going to make a super group. We're going to fight back against these conceptions. So yeah, I say listen to the record by Boy Genius and watch Saint Maud.
Yeah.
Saint Maud, go for it. Laron?
Man, this reminded me so much of one of my top 10 favorite movies is Bound.
I put it on my list too.
Yeah, and which, by the way, is getting a 4K Blu-ray Criterion in June, so I could not be more elated about that. It reminds me a lot of that in terms of the crime thriller and using queer characters, in the forefront of that, and the tension behind that, and making them complex and layered characters. Black Swan comes to mind
Yes.
a lot with the body horror elements, and whether it's fantastical or it's real or it's in their head or imagined. That's something that came to mind as her body was kind of morphing and contorting. And then Sunrise mentioned Thelma and Louise. That was one that also came to mind. So those are three that I think would be good reference points for this if you liked it.
Top-notch recommendations. You stole two of mine. Those are
So
all
sorry.
great. No. It's great. It's not a competition, Laron. We're all on the same page. I love those are good recommends. I think Bound, as we were talking about, the idea of trying to escape the patriarchy via the vehicle of a crime thriller is a lot of overlap there. Sunrise, what would you recommend?
Yeah, Bound is one that I felt like he was going to say, and I was like, what can I work around that's Bound? And I'm glad that Bound came up. Certainly, if you haven't watched Raising Arizona, that's the one I mentioned earlier. There are two others that kind of came to mind, but they're so entrenched in a male perspective. I don't know if they're quite right, but I'm sure they had some influence. And one is David Lynch's The Lost Highway, which I feel like is another character that's sort of like trying to figure out how to stop things from wheeling out of their control, or whether things are in control, if things are real, if they're not. And then it's also like a question of identity. And then also U-Turn, which is Oliver Stone's like, weird noir, psychedelic noir, maybe from like the late 90s with Sean Penn in a town where it seems like
Is
nothing.
J-Lo in it?
J-Lo is in it, yeah.
A very understated role, but yes.
Understated, yeah. But those came to mind in terms of like how absurd and surrealistic in the direction of the noir that went.
Okay.
Very nice. I think those are all great recommendations. It just speaks to how versatile this film was in terms of style. I mean, gosh, I'd add in, I think this has a very teeny tiny touch of the Nicholas Winding Refn's drive, and especially in terms of how he's incorporating that retro soundtrack as part of the score
and the visual
and the visuals. Just again, there's light influence. Yes, yeah, the neon lights. I'd also add in the Safdie brothers' Good Time, another movie where you're watching and you're like, wow, these people haven't bathed in a month.
Yeah.
They're all gross.
Yeah.
And then lastly, if you want to go back to the classics, adjacent but crime thriller, The French Connection. I think there's a lot of overlap in terms of the lived-in world that I liked about that. But again, I think all the recommendations you all have said have been top-notch as well. I'd probably start with those.
Oh, can I throw one in?
Yeah.
I thought of Inherent Vice.
Oh, so good.
So I don't know. When I was, so I'll throw that one in there.
That's an underrated Anderson film.
Yeah.
It
kind of gets lost.
Yes.
It didn't get much love, but I love Joaquin. He's nuts in that one, but
can't wait to see him in Joker Fala Adu later this year.
Lady Gaga.
Can't wait to see what that movie holds. I good or bad. It's going to be
It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. All right. With that said, let's move into our spoiler discussion for Love Lies Bleeding. So if you don't want to know what happens, especially in the latter 2/3 of the film, go ahead and tune out now.
Do you remember how much you wanted to be around me 3 days ago? That's gone now, right?
Long gone.
Because it was her. From the beginning, it was Nessie who wanted me there.
Nessie? You nicknamed my daughter after the Loch Ness Monster?
All right, so we already talked about this a fair amount in the spoiler-free section, but let's get a little more specific. I want to talk about bringing this queer romance, or just to be a little more specific, a romance between two women to the crime thriller genre. Love Lies Bleeding, as we've mentioned, really leans on tropes and familiar beats from the popular crime thriller films that we've seen in the past. But I do think it deviates or adds a little more in some key areas. So I just want to open up the floor by asking, more specifically, how does Love Lies Bleeding use what we've come to expect from crime thrillers sort of as a launch pad to explore the queer experience, or the two women lovers sort of experience point of view? And Cam, I would feel awful if I asked any man at this table to go first. So you kick us off. No pressure.
I know. I'm like, I'm the ambassador for all women right now. No,
queer women too.
The queer women, yes. No, I honestly, again, like I said, it's their romance is there, and there are moments of, they call her a dyke, like they call her some things. Dave Franco's character doesn't want her touching the kids. Like, there's subtle moments of
misogyny and homophobia.
Right? I think the bodybuilding really, like, the idea of masculinity and femininity is played upon in a very fascinating way. Because, you think about a queer relationship where it's like someone has to be the masculine one. Like, everyone's always thinking about the binary, right?
Mhm.
You got to have both. And what I loved about this film in relation to it kind of like sets up these preconceptions of who you think the strongest character is going to be. And it ends up being Kristen Stewart, right? Where you see Katie or Jackie, you think she's going to be the muscle the whole time. She's going to protect Lou, but no, like it's the opposite.
Yeah.
And it's like she wears makeup, like, has her hair done, like, there's just like again, like I had all these feelings and I feel like I'm rambling at this point, but I really enjoyed the fact that it wasn't all about them being gay, even though it is a tension that is there. And also the idea of bisexuality as well, with the character of Jackie having to probably exchange sex for living somewhere. You know what I'm saying? And then, it's brought up when they're fighting, she's like, well, I thought you told me you were gay, and it's kind of discussed upon. And I was like, please don't be biphobic. Like, let's not go there. Like, because there is that kind of conversation in the community, at least, where it's like, you can't be bi, you're either one or the other. And there's a lot of blending of this idea. So I feel like the film really played upon that and the idea of like masculinity and femininity and like, what does it mean to us? And like, to me as well, I was just thinking like, I want to be this character that can be strong emotionally and also physically, or it's okay to be a little sensitive and vulnerable as well. So I don't know if that answered your question.
No, I think it absolutely answered the question, because there's this tension sort of lying beneath within the tropes of the crime genre.
Yes.
I thought it was really beautiful, but also twisted later was the moment where she says, I love you, which it was really powerful in the moment, but later kind of bites in the ass whenever she finds out that she was sleeping with that other woman, which, by the way, that's where it got Coen Brothers comedic, where that one, the weird other ex-girlfriend, Daisy.
The annoying Daisy.
In her teeth. Oh my goodness.
But yeah, a little bit of nice comedy there when she gets assassinated. First, you're shot. It's kind of shocking.
I didn't know what happened. I was like, I saw like the liquid on which ultimately with blood on Kristen Stewart's face. I was like, what did I just? Because you just saw her.
She saw her vomit.
That was a smart move because they had us fixating on that really grotesque imagery of just her like vomiting on the ground, and you're thinking of that. So you're fixated on that and you're not. So then you see something else, you don't know what it is. And like, wait, what's just happened? And then a lot of things are happening in the same moment. So really cool. But
and then Jackie's the one who pulls the trigger too. Again, I thought that this was an interesting idea that it all falls within this crime, which in a lot of ways could represent the patriarchy in which Ed Harris is running this crime syndicate, trying to control women. He's only using them as pawns against one another. He wants a relationship with his daughter, but not really, not for the reasons that a father would probably,
It's a narcissistic love.
Yes. Yeah. So I love the idea of really Lou and Jackie teaming up, and it's sort of like cliche, silly, but their love and their bond together is what empowered them to beat and leave the system.
Right.
And like you said, Sunrise earlier, and then they just have to. What is their life going to look like? I don't know. They've killed a lot of people, but they were able to they liberated each other / themselves from these expectations that have been placed on them for their whole life. I don't know. I just thought that was really compelling. Reminded me of Bound a lot, honestly.
But it's not like fully resolved, I mean, in a perfect world, obviously film is an escape and everything, but it still didn't feel resolved. Like, sure, they escaped this one situation, but what are they gonna look like?
It's a ripple effect. Yeah.
Right. And there's the vices, right? Like the addiction to the steroids, addiction to cigarettes, addiction to one another that like amour fou or whatever, the crazy love in French. That's what it means. Like this whole all-consuming love. So they escaped a situation, but I feel like being queer woman in the 80s leading to the 90s, it's still going to be an ongoing issue no matter where they go, but I love that the film doesn't need to resolve everything for us. It just gets them out of a situation that is terrible,
Right. It doesn't make them saints either. Like you said, they both have nasty habits that they're taking with them, and the relationship is you see the connection. It's beautiful. It's sweet, but also they don't really know each other that well at the end of the day.
No.
What did you think? So we have that scene where Jackie gets the phone, or she makes the phone call, and it's presumably, and you guys tell me if I misread this, she's calling her former lover or mother. I was a little
I think
confused.
it's like a sibling.
Or sibling?
Foster sibling or something.
Yeah, it sounded like a foster sibling, and then probably the foster parent that was saying, "Don't call back."
Yeah.
You're a monster.
You're a monster, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the third time the word monster is mentioned in
thrown at
relation
her,
to
yeah.
it.
Yeah. And there's like the mythology of creating a monster. Like, is Lou created by her father into a monster? I don't know. There's a lot of like bodybuilding and building creating some kind of creature or a monster that I thought was really interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought that was also sort of a nod where it could work. Again, presuming it's a straight male character, it works. He did something awful in the past, and they don't want to talk anymore. In this case, it made me wonder. Just having spoken with some queer friends about like, hey, their families are disowning them or saying we don't want to talk to you anymore. And I know it's like little things like that. It felt like an added nuance that really just hits differently.
Yeah. For sure.
And it was nice, as you mentioned, Cam, from the queer perspective of thinking of like how, what's beautiful is that they are queer characters featured in a genre film, and that's not the story,
right?
Because that is a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal because it's just, I feel like when they became the subject, then then everything, all the other story elements and everything else kind of has to take a secondary seat to everything else. And I think that it's more interesting if they're integrated organically into it. But it is also important to emphasize the nuances of that experience, as you mentioned, the intertension within the community about how they perceive bisexuality. As there's always been an argument about that. Pick a side, like don't play both sides, because then you don't feel like you know where you belong. But then that alienates that group and does exactly to that group what we're saying. Yeah. So that is a conflict within the community. So I do like that they address it. And then, as you mentioned, kind of casual misogyny, casual homophobic comments that come from the other characters is something we experience, but there's also this, how they combat those things and how they occupy space and how they confront it, and so I love that it shows them as being, their strength in that. And also, but what I do think that's different in this movie from the way a lot of queer characters are, portrayed in others is this tension between strength and vulnerability, particularly as it pertains to the body, and how Jackie's character is kind of becoming the physical manifestation of strength, and almost in a superhuman sort of way. And I love that, again, just playing with that idea of that the interconnectedness of masculinity and femininity that can exist in one person, but seems to be the focal point of what people reference when they think of queer people.
Yeah.
Is that we're disrupting people's perception of how these things can coexist in one person, and you don't have to pick one thing and just be that thing. Men are masculine, women are feminine. You can do both of those things at the same time, and it doesn't make you gay or straight,
Exactly.
but we just kind of get the magnifying glass when it comes to those particular qualities in human experience. But
yeah, I think that's well said. Sunrise or Chris, anything you want to add about, just how the film maybe uses some familiar tropes, adds a layer with the queer reading?
Particularly the added layer of like this sort of fantastical elements that come into play at the end, and as it relates to the queer narrative that you guys have been talking about, because we haven't really addressed the fact yet that at the end, at the climax of this film, Jackie literally becomes like
super bodybuilder,
like she becomes a giant and is instrumental in stopping Lou Sr., the Ed Harris character, from murdering Lou, Kristen Stewart. And so this body transformation that happens, and this sort of physical embodiment of strength that Laron was talking about, it very much, it's so telling because she's able to pick up Ed Harris as like a doll in that moment, And what I found really interesting too was the use of Kristen Stewart with the gun and sort of the phallic, ramifications that come with that when she's literally shoving the gun into Ed Harris's mouth. This very, it has a ring of sort of a sexual assault to it.
Yeah.
So it's a moment that we're sort of cheering this moment too in some odd ways, and this is sort of that inconclusiveness that we've been talking about comes into play as well, because you feel empowered, but also you feel kind of almost icky about what's happening at the end. Yeah,
I felt this. Sorry to chime in really quick.
No,
I thought
please.
it was like a lot of penetration throughout the.
Yes.
So
especially in that sequence.
In that sequence, penetration of the steroids in the body, them making love to one another, showing each other how they pleasure themselves, and then the final act of inserting it into his father's mouth.
There's also the crevice.
The crevice.
Yeah.
So it was that whole patriarchal aggression, masculinity, but I like in the end that when she is the big She-Hulk creature, she could become aggressive and violent, but all she does is hold him down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I thought that's the feminine idea of nurturing, caring, holding down a child, essentially, of like, you're done now.
Yeah.
And Lou could have just blown her dad's head off, but she's just like, I'm done.
She doesn't. Yeah, she
I'll
doesn't
hold
pull the
you
trigger.
down.
Yeah.
So it's like that rejection of, I'm not going to succumb to this violence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Assert dominance, but not
become this. Yeah.
I think it's also tied directly to, like, again, this idea of the generic element of the past. It feels like we have a flashback at those final moments where Kristen's involved, or Lou is involved in the shooting of these people. I mean, that's something we learned from the FBI, that she's helping to hide the violence that's perpetrated by her father and her father's system. And there's a different, like, appearance of her that actually kind of looks like, Kristen Stewart from, like, Eclipse or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
The longer hair.
The longer hair, and then like the tessellated, or like with the shirt that's very like yours, like checkered past.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Symbolism.
Rose did it, not me.
You need sound effects.
Yeah.
Just like
Hold on.
But those things are intertwined. Like, the idea of the gun is intertwined with this idea of her working with her father in the past, and the fact that her father runs the sort of like weapons trafficking organization, and that he also makes this statement about how, like, weapons are like the control that you can have on your environment and people, and it feels like all of it is directly linked to this sort of way to resolve problems that stem from the father. And it's interesting that Lou does not resort to the use of a gun until it's the absolute, like, last resort, and she pulls the gun out, and the last time I saw it, I was like, oh, don't tell me that she's got a gun, because she's trying to not be her father. And it seems like it's also related to this position that these men have placed women, regardless of their identity. It's like, you've got to resolve problems in this way, and you're going to act this way, and otherwise I'm going to, do whatever I want with your circumstance, and you can't have any way out. And it feels like that's something that Jackie also recognizes at the moment where, like, Lou is looking at her bruised sister, and her father's right next to her, and he's like, we'll resolve this. And it's almost like she has no agency at that moment, and the one who does is the one who cares, and the one who's sort of outside of the system, and one that can rise above and not use guns as a way to resolve problems. It feels like all of these things are sort of like tied together as elements of noir, and sort of like questioning approaches of patriarchal resolving of problems. And then who's the person that can sort of like figure out how to come in and resolve a third solution. And all those elements were really building up these sort of like the integration that we're talking about here, where like the queer motivations are the fact that these two women understand why they're put in these positions. And it's the situation, it's the system, and it's not them.
Yeah.
Right. And the fact that we can also see that puts us in this position where we completely understand that it's the individual that's trapped in a system And I thought those things were really amazing in terms of like understanding why characters in a certain situation, even Daisy,
Yeah.
feels like she's put in a position. She's just another victim of like Lou Senior's systematic manipulations, and poor thing.
I know.
Yes, it was. Her teeth, and she was gnawing her teeth were gross, but she did not deserve to go that way. That was awful. I actually felt so bad.
I did.
Just
But
I think I think you nailed it. And you guys hit on this with the phallic imagery. I wanted to pose the question. You guys can tell me if I'm crazy, but one thing that stuck out to me was the crevice, and they drop the car into the crevice. And then there was
didn't make that connection until this podcast, but thank you for that.
Everyone that was Sunrise, definitely.
Yeah.
But also, I'm thinking to add one more step. This is where you guys can tell me if I'm crazy. Smoke coming up, it definitely felt more like a female orgasm.
Yeah.
We see a lot. We talk about phallic imagery a lot, but not so much about the female side of it. And it's like there was this eruption of smoke that went out that everyone could see. I don't know. It just really like that. The all that smokestack stuff I thought was really powerful imagery, sort of under that matches the ideas we're talking about in the film. And it kind of goes to your point about it's like the counter to the phallic imagery that we're frequently talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The yonic imagery that we're seeing. Absolutely.
Well, because it's more like a womb or like female, like. Right, whatever. But yeah, the crevice, right? All of that. But I think of the motivational posters in the gym where it's like, heat is, get heated up or something. Or it's like pain is weakness leaving the body, right?
Yes,
so there's a lot of release or like orgasm, kind of there's
heat.
Heat.
And those sex scenes feel very similar in their heatedness.
Yes. Yeah. Very steamy.
Yes.
Very steamy.
Very steamy and very warm, and
and they throw each other around too. There's like this idea of like, it's not always so gentle. It can be playful. It can be kind of like, they're exploring each other's, which I enjoyed. I mean, I don't know. There was just something about it that felt like really lived in and like not performative and like, they were just having fun.
Yeah.
Choreographed. Right. The whole, like when she throws Kristen and then the painting almost falls down.
Yeah.
All of that when she's the fire on her feet.
Yeah. The fire.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was reading that she actually did that. She's like, Kristen's down to play. Like, and I think she learned that from the French, like, because the French she said she learned a lot about acting when she did a lot of French films with Olivier.
Of course.
They live in the moment. It's not about like, what am I, it's like, just do whatever feels right. And you can
Capture
see
real.
how that's transformed Kristen as a actor, just like you were saying, the little kicks, the little things, it's just amazing.
Adds that authenticity to each scene, which especially when you're talking about like sex scenes or things like that, it's something we've talked about on this podcast the last couple of years. Not a lot of that in cinema. And I think even with a movie like Poor Things that we've already talked about on the podcast, where there is a lot of sex, but it's definitely not steamy. It feels very mechanical.
Yeah.
It's
employed a different
contrast.
way for sure. For sure.
Yeah. So is sex back in the cinemas? Is that what I'm hearing?
It's trying to make a comeback.
A24 is making a real good push for it.
They're trying to save it.
Yeah.
Well, we already hit on, a lot of the points at the ending I wanted to cover. Do we think, what did you guys think about all of the Jackie's hulking out? Where were we going with that in terms of, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to read the ending. Did she actually hulk out? And is that a thing that actually happened in the fiction? Is that just what's going on in her mind in that moment? What does that sort of things, those sorts of things mean? I don't know that it matters, the realism versus the magical element, but I thought the way that they deployed it was so Cronenberg. It's all like cracking her bones, kind of tearing her shirts off,
They had to groan each time.
Like the worm, because, you see the worm and the bugs that he likes, and then she pukes up the worm, Kristen Stewart worm.
Yeah.
It was just like,
that was such a cool scene.
That was incredible.
Amazing.
It's sort of a birthing scene.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though there's no eggs in her.
Yeah.
In her breakfast.
Yeah.
I will say that very briefly, it's not just the hulking out the end. That's the one we notice because it's so extreme. But she hulks out in terms of size when she kills Franco.
Yes.
There's like a shot. It's almost like I didn't notice it at first, but it's like very low looking up. And so we can mistake the camera position for distorting her. But she's like almost hitting the ceiling.
Yeah.
And he's very tiny.
Yeah.
And then there's also a moment where she's like working out alone in front of the mirror, and she starts to grow only in the mirror and not in outside of the mirror.
Wow.
Which is really interesting. So it felt to me like there's something going on there in terms of her perception. And whether we notice it or not.
Yeah.
I didn't notice it the first viewing.
Yeah.
And it does seem to like illustrate just like the extreme measures that she's going to do to achieve this idea of success she has, whether it is feeling like she's physically strong, or and also just how willing she is to impress or go to the extreme lengths to protect Kristen Stewart's character, and I like even the fact that she's the one that kills JJ. I thought that was interesting because honestly, the way it was building up, if Kristen was like, I will kill him if this happens, and then ultimately she's not involved in it at all, and I thought that was interesting.
By the way, just want to pause and talk about holy cow, brutal murder. Brutal.
It's so well choreographed.
Oh, yeah.
Like we didn't really notice it until like Lou is like, what?
Is he actually dead? Oh, he is turbo dead.
Right.
And also, I just have to give a shout out to Franco. He's gotten so good at playing sleazy scumbags. Oh,
like his brother.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of icky when you think about that in that context. But
one might be one, and one might act like one.
Yeah, one's the real and one's the mirror.
Well, I thought it turned even funnier with the sound because his jaw clacking.
Clacking.
That was just so
gosh.
ridiculous. I don't know.
Also, again, this is more the comedy. I'm just now throwing out random stuff right now.
Yeah.
But like Kristen, Lou, I would say Kristen Stewart, Lou had to clean up so much blood in this movie.
Yeah, hilarious the third time.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
This is what it's like to be in this society.
Yeah.
You have to constantly clean up the messes that other people create for you.
Women have to clean the messes.
That's true.
And there's a sense of being a cleaner as of being an assassin, right?
Yeah.
So she provides that kind of.
Well, her character introduction. She's
just
she's unclogging a toilet. It's very grotesque.
Penetrating. Like it's like a lot of like pushing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. It looks like it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
It's like a great allegory.
Yeah. But because again, like Lou doesn't look like a feminine, it's more like non-binary. I thought Lou was a little more non-binary in a sense.
Yeah.
She struck me that way.
Yeah. And then she's the one cleaning. She's the one nurturing. She's the one feeding and providing shelter to Jackie.
Making the breakfast.
Yeah. So I loved how it played on those like visual conceptions that we might think of, like, oh, she's gonna be the butch, and it's like, no, it's like people contain multitudes, and it's more than just what we are trained to believe. Especially with being bisexual, people think you got to pick a side. It's like, why do we have to put a binary within our own culture that like you were saying, like we're trying to get away from this, but we're still
fighting. There's still tension there.
Yeah.
Well, I had a lot of other questions. We hit on a lot of this stuff already, though. So I'm just coming up on time. I just want to ask, is there any other things about the movie that you all would like to talk about before we wrap up today?
So there's one aspect I know that we're kind of alluding to about mentioning, like the defeat and escape. That whole the whole aspect of this fantasy on screen. You have a question here, like, what is it? How does the defeat and escape fantasy displayed on screen tied to the broader themes of the queer romance? And this is the one aspect and reason I haven't given this an A++. And maybe chime in for if anyone disagrees, but it's the one aspect of the movie that I did think didn't have as much of a progressive idea about or a progressive perspective on. Because we're still ending with these characters in disarray. They're pariahs. They have to escape their reality. They can't coexist in the world. And I think that is a reality. But it's the one aspect of this where that element of being queer in the world is like, again, we can't be here. We can't take up space. We have to leave or escape the world, to be.
You have to make yourself
smaller or disappear, go to a new space that we haven't infiltrated yet, and so while it's exciting to see them leave and escape this situation, as you mentioned, there's still this heavy feeling of like, it's just a matter of time before that catches back up with them. And that's not just the crimes they've committed, but just them existing in this male-dominated world, again, in the 80s, in this kind of westernized space. And so that's one thing that I kind of wish, and I don't know how you would fix that, but it's just something that I've seen. And even at the end of one of my favorite movies, Bound, it's a similar situation. They get away with it, but there's still this tension around, what's going to happen to them next. There's not really a happy ending for them still.
I read an interview with Rose Glass, and she talked about the very, very ending, which is, of course, that Daisy is still alive. In the
It's also,
truck.
again, great comedy. You know what I mean?
Right,
Her head just
right.
popped up. She just like,
But Kristen Stewart then strangles her, kills her, and drags her off into the desert. Which again is very, very comic, but also at the same time you're feeling very, very wrong about laughing about it in a lot of ways. But Rose Glass talked about how that was symbolic of the violence in this world being cyclical, and once a violent act is committed, it continues to spin, and it never really goes away. And so I think thinking about the when this film is set and how it plays into what we're dealing with now, and we talked about. Laron, you said earlier, I think when we were talking about the Oscars at some point, but I think it brings it back to this film, which is that we haven't learned anything. And so all of these things that we're talking about, like this, the binary and how we have to have that, societally speaking, this all comes back to this moment of it's all cyclical. It all just keeps perpetuating itself. And we can't really escape it.
It's also another trope in the crime thriller genre, is that the violence never ends. You're never really out, truly. You're just on to the next iteration of the
You buy
violence.
yourself some time.
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember that this is like 1989.
It's true.
And historically there is this question, what's coming? Well, there is also a new year coming. We do know that as a result of the Berlin Wall coming down in the TV, we know that there is change coming, and so we know it's coming. And in that way, I think because of where we are historically, I, was sitting here in the audience, was thinking, okay, they got a better world coming. There is a place that they can go, but also, I mean, they do need to resolve their own personal issues to get there.
True.
And maybe they don't escape. We don't actually know that because her father, who is running this syndicate, he's got, Lou is the name that's on the Louisville is the same as his name. And it could be that she just goes right back and takes over. And she, to some degree, seems to have some footing if he had control of the police.
Yeah.
And she knows what was happening in terms of the relationship between the police and her father. It's possible that they don't escape.
Yeah.
Like literally don't leave town. They just find a way to reestablish. That was something that I was thinking in terms of like whether they escape or they don't. Yeah. Because of the smoking, I was like, okay, we're going back to old habits. So we're going to go back.
She's smoking a cigarette during the
right,
credits.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
And with her sister too. I mean, also Jenna Malone was perfect casting.
Oh yeah.
Because I'm like, her and Kristen are same kind of generation.
Yeah.
Similar style, kind of similar vibe of like projects and stuff like that. But when they fought, I'm like, maybe she's severing ties with her sister, but I'm like, no, I fight with my sisters like this all the time. Yeah. And it's, there's also the question of their mother, like what happened to their mother, was she thrown in the crevice, or is she just gone? What is,
we still don't really know.
We don't know,
Depends on how much you trust Lou Sr.
Yeah.
And that skullet.
I don't trust anyone.
I don't trust anyone with a skullet. No.
But I could be wrong. Didn't they say she was like psychic or something? Like, didn't they say something or sidekick? Maybe I thought I heard psychic.
Sidekick.
Okay, I heard psychic.
The FBI said you were a pretty good sidekick.
Like apparently Franco JJ had painted her in his telling of what was going on to the FBI was that she was actually a key partner in the criminal syndicate. Yeah.
Because he was like an informant, right?
Right.
Oh,
yeah.
right. Yeah.
Well, and at one point, Kristen Stewart was, in fact, helping her dad.
Yes.
Very, very explicitly. So.
Yeah. And it seemed like the men they were throwing in there were like Latino Hispanic men.
right.
So that was even more of that tension of the border.
Yes.
I was
Yeah.
watching Sicario the other day, so I was like, oh, this is fresh. You know, the imagery is fresh in my mind.
Yeah.
So
And that's like in the montage of like the weapons when they're like building them and
Yes.
stocking them. There's like the don't cross the border and they're like shooting the sign.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Time that part's probably timelier than we'd like. Oh, go ahead.
I will also say there's sort of like a hidden element. It's interesting to me that there's just the implication of AIDS. There's sort of like
Yeah.
one poster
Yeah.
and the use of these needles. And it's interesting that it feels like that's sort of something that's circling. And I don't really know what to do with that, but I feel like that's somewhat
it's
present
important.
in the narrative.
It's certainly a feature of the time.
Yeah.
Needle we
Particularly
hadn't
the 80s,
reckoned.
yeah.
We hadn't reckoned as a culture with needles and AIDS quite in that way.
particularly with that community,
Yes.
how
Yeah.
people responded with it.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Such
Yeah.
a hyper masculine community getting HIV
Yes.
because they're not cleaning up their
They're not cleaning.
needles.
Right. Yeah.
And you never see her clean the needle.
You never see them
Nope.
clean. Yeah.
No.
In fact, at one point when she shoots up her like in between her toes, it looks like
it's
it's actually
awful.
It looks infected.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ugh.
It's rough.
Yes, it looks rough.
It was,
Yeah.
nasty.
Well, final note.
Don't end on
move
AIDS,
away.
please.
We got to end on an up swing, guys. I'm glad you mentioned that though, because I think again in the year 2024, we really need to position ourselves culturally with that setting and that time frame and the posters, what that means in the larger context of the film, so we can really understand, I think, where the movie's leading us. What's your takeaway that you hope other filmmakers who want to explore, say, the crime genre or queer storytelling or both, like what is the takeaway you hope other filmmakers take note of? And I'm asking this because this is such a fresh, modestly budgeted film that has such a strong vision and an idea, and I'm like, I just want to see like 10 more of these. I want to I want Cord Jefferson. I want us to get like his speech saying at the Oscars. We need 10 more movies at this budget. Like what do you hope that other filmmakers, junior or senior, can take away from a film like Localized Bleeding?
Well, I hope they get the imagination to be able to play with form, because what I'm learning, what I see with this one is like, if you just focus on the crime aspect of this movie, it's kind of ordinary. The story's kind of ordinary, but what makes it unique, what makes it interesting is the integration of different like perspectives, because then it has us reevaluate and recontextualize this material. And then also it gives us deeper insight into their minds and their mindsets. And they do so by actually playing with form and doing these different, incorporating these other genre elements like body horror or magic realism or supernatural elements. And all of those things help us, you know what I mean? Like it shows you just how diverse the film form can be. And so there's other ways, I guess, to make your point or illustrate things that don't have to be so by the numbers, because so I think that's one thing for sure for me.
Experiment with the form. I love it.
Yeah.
I would say related to that is that relying on your form to kind of do a lot of the work and just trust your audience that they'll piece it together, right? The idea that one thing we didn't get to is I think Lou is coming from a privileged background. The fact that her father has this really opulent environment, and it seems like she and her sister had a bedroom there, and that she's like taken the privilege of being able to have access to books and art, and that's in her own apartment. And she comes from this background. I feel like all those things are there in the production design, the things that she's doing, like reading, and the objects that she's interacting with. It feels like those are filling in a background of the character, and it's Rose is really trusting me to piece those things together, but she's also doing all the work to make sure that those things are reflected in the environment. It's not just set dressing that was bought from IKEA or wherever.
Yeah.
So I would say that, the amount of things that are available to you in any 1/8 of a film or 1/8 of a page of a film is like so many attributes of the form: cinematography, sound, production design, wardrobe, hair, and just filmmakers that take advantage of all those things get so much farther, I think. And this just really reiterating what Laron just said, but please do that. This is also really amazing in hair. I don't know. I get on a hair bandwagon all the time, but it's really, we talked about the hair already. You can't talk about the mullets, but the fact that Rose thought enough about how hair communicates who the characters are is really indicative of the fact that this person's very talented and thinking about and utilizing all their departments.
Yeah.
So they're there. There's all this creativity, and I just want to see more of that.
I don't know, Sunrise. I was definitely missing a monologue from Dave Franco about why his hair was what it was. I feel like that was missing, Yeah.
Rat tail.
Like a little.
Yeah. Yeah. I did love how greasy like Daisy's hair was.
Yes.
Also. It's like not extreme, but it's just like clearly like
Unwashed.
unhealthy.
Like she was on stuff. Like,
Right, yes,
I
absolutely.
mean, and then the whole idea of like the having sex in parking lots for
Right. Yeah.
getting more out of
Yeah.
I mean, maybe
Transactional. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Yeah. I am happy that finally we get Kristen Stewart in a mullet that didn't quite work in the Joan Jett movie. The Runaways.
Yeah.
And I was like, finally, this is working out.
It's fine.
Yeah. I saw the potential there. Yeah.
Well, I think she's just out now. I think like her being out and, she's engaged to a woman because I think Runaways was still her Twilight era, right? So
Yeah,
she was still struggling with those emotions of like, what is it that I'm supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
So I
you
think
can see how much more comfortable she is in roles now that she is living authentically too.
Yeah.
Because her even in speeches, whenever she's articulating or campaigning for movies and stuff like that, you can just see that she's more articulate with herself. She knows what she wants to say.
Yeah.
So.
And she just has swagger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Incredible confidence. I love it. It just matches what Denis Villeneuve said a couple weeks ago. I don't totally agree, but dialogue is not for cinema. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I take the spirit of what he's saying, which is figure out how to tell the story visually, and the dialogue's there to kind of clarify, versus having things over explained, which I think, especially in at least the last decade, it just feels like we have to have things over explained.
Yeah. Marvel.
Yeah.
Marvel.
Yeah.
They just think audiences are dumb, and it's like there's so much happening visually that you remember more than lines of dialogue, honestly, to be honest.
Maybe.
Yeah.
For me, at least. I don't know.
Oh, no, I'm the same way.
Oh,
I remember.
interesting.
I'm with you, though, because I actually am bad at memorizing movie lines.
Me
Like,
too.
I'm terrible. Like, I have friends who can recite whole monologues. I can remember how it made me feel, but I can tell you what I won't forget.
You mean you can't repeat the Barbie monologue for us right now?
Oh, no.
What's the Barbie model?
Exactly.
Yeah, there you go.
The America Ferrera moment?
Yes.
Ferrera,
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Being a woman's hard. That's what I remember.
So
you got it.
hard.
It's an incredible monologue. And I feel awful. Okay, take foot out of mouth. All I'm saying is, I images will stick with me. They'll be burned in the back of my brain that I'll never forget. A lot more than an iconic line will, which is not how it is for everybody.
Yeah.
But I do think there's something to that.
Yeah, I have really crazy, vivid dreams, and it's I'm watching shorts all the time.
Yes.
So for deadCenter, so I'm always having crazy dreams, and I never know what I'm even like they're talking about. So I don't know. Anyway, goes to someone else.
All right, Chris, anything you want to add before we wrap up today's show?
Just that you can do a lot with very little. This film is pretty small budget, I think, just a few locations. And it didn't seem like it took that much money, but it's so imaginative and so grand in so many ways. So you can think big even when you're dealing with something smaller.
Well said. Think big, execute small. I guess. I don't know if that's what you meant. But anyway,
No,
think
that's good.
big. Think big. All right. Well, I think that is all the time we have for today, because clearly we could talk about this movie for another hour, no doubt. With that said, where can listeners keep up with you and all your work online? I'm going to start by saying to each one of our panelists, we'll start with you, Cam.
Oh, I mean, deadcenterfilm.org. Check it out.
Pass is on sale. Yeah.
I'm mostly doing that. I've been trying to transition more into filmmaking, but it's just work schedule and everything. But some point I will have something in that sense of like writing and creating stuff. But for now, just check out deadCenter, June 6th through 9th. Coming up real hot.
It's coming up
real
fast.
It's coming
But we have amazing things in the works. So yeah, that's where you can check me out. Yeah.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for
Pleasure having
having me.
you on.
Yay.
Chris Shultz, where can people follow you online?
I'm most active on Instagram. My handle is _Agastus _. So that's AGHASTUS. And yeah, I'll actually have a review of this film on Flick Attack as well. So
very nice.
Be on the lookout for that.
Super cool. Sunrise Tippeconnie?
You also at deadcenterfilm.org. You can see all the stuff that we do there. You can see our newsletter. Obviously, what Cam said, I'll repeat. There's some great things coming in, so make sure you get your passes. You can also follow me on Letterboxd if you're interested. It's just SUNRISE. This film is on a list that I have about like the greatest audiences of 2024. I'm also a co-host on the Real Indigenous podcast, and you can follow us at Real Indigenous Pod on Instagram, and maybe Patreon, which is Real Indigenous Podcast.
Check it out, Real Indigenous. Great conversations. I learn a lot from tuning in, and I laugh a few times.
That's great.
So, yeah. Laron Chapman. Oh, wait. Actually, Laron, I'm going to take this moment.
Oh.
We've only been teasing it. You are now publishing a new column on the Cinematropolis.com. And we had a whole week dedicated to you writing reviews from sort of your greatest hits of the beginning of 2024.
One of them was a Coen brother movie. One Coen brother.
What? One of the Coens.
One of the Coens.
Were they
Ethan.
Driving Away?
Drive-Away Dolls.
Yeah.
Which also another great,
Yeah.
fun time.
Comparative to this.
Oh, well, yeah.
So, Laron, tell us about that. Tell real insights with Laron Chapman. Where can people follow that? What's it about?
I've been just like tenaciously writing film reviews on platforms that don't reach many people, and people have started to and built a small following for it for years now, and I've always just done it for fun, and just because I love talking about film in any capacity, and they've just always been like fun writing exercises for me. But because of popular demand, I decided that it would be nice to have them on an actual official platform, and so that you can now follow all of my reviews at thecinematropolis.com.
Yes. Welcome. We're so happy. Real Insights with Laron Chapman, ladies and gentlemen. He's got 5 up. We had a whole week where it was one a day. It was great.
Prolific.
Society of the Snow, Drive-Away Dolls, Dune Part 2, the Mean Girls, the musical, or Mean Girls 2024, but the musical version. And then there was another one.
There is another one in there. I don't even remember what it was, but you will, because you're going to go check it out
at thecinematropolis.com.
Yeah.
Hey, Laron, we're really thrilled to have you right on the platform. Welcome. It's been a blast. And hopefully we'll get you hooked up with some more new audiences as well.
For sure.
And listeners, you can keep up with the Cinematropolis, all the things at thecinematropolis.com or on Instagram or Facebook, or X or Threads at the Cinematrop, or on Facebook, facebook.com/Cinematropolis. I'm on all the things, C Masters Talk, letter C Masters Talk, podcast over at Cinematropolis. I do write little letterbox blurbs, not nearly as detailed as Laron's, but check me out there. All right. Well, hey, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Sunrise, thanks for coming back. Chris, thanks for coming back. Laron, thanks for being amazing as always. Yes. And listeners, thank you for joining us. We'll catch you again next time when we review Doug Liman's remake of Roadhouse, starring Jake Gyllenhaal. The film is streaming on Amazon Prime Video starting March 21st. It's going to be a fun one.